Okay, hello everyone. I'm Jeff Bellantoni. I am Dean of the College of Visual and Performing Arts, and it's my pleasure to be speaking with alumnus Matt Fretschel, who graduated with a BFA degree in 2003. How are you doing, Matt?
Doing great, thanks.
Good, good. Well, listen, so tell us a little bit about what you've been doing since 2003 and your career in professional art.
Yeah, so I graduated. I thought I had a job lined up in South Carolina with a like portrait and slash fashion photographer that eventually fell through. He took a different route with his business and didn't need me for what he wanted to do. And so then I went up to New York. Long story, but I had all of the knowledge that I needed to work cameras, but I wanted to get into like the commercial realm. And at the time at Winthrop, there actually wasn't any sort of like commercial track for photography. It was all fine art. And so a gentleman was nice enough out of like Washington State to just basically be like, hey, you don't really have a whole lot of experience in the commercial world, and so it's going to be really hard for you to be working as like an assistant or whatever. And so he suggested that like work for free basically and become an intern again. And I had done that in college, but it was in like with a museum. And so I got a hold of a photographer that I really liked in New York. She was like, if you want to come work for free, I will gladly bring you on as an intern. And so I think in 2005, I packed up my bags and went up there and started working with a lady by the name of Sarah Silver. She's a fashion beauty photographer. And she was kind of like one of the like first persons that already jumped into the digital world. At the time that I graduated, there was still like film and digital was um, just starting,
Mm.
which is weird because now it seems like everybody's using digital and now film is coming back in. Anyway, so I went up there. I started learning everything I could about digital cameras and working with computers and digital cameras, and being on set with some high-end fashion clients. And she just kind of showed me the ropes of what it would be like to be a commercial photographer. Not shortly after that, probably like within 3 or 4 months, because of that experience, I started working with an ad agency up there that is now defunct. And no one used digital cameras in their building, and so I was brought in to basically teach
Mm.
these film photographers how to use digital cameras. And so like it was literally me going like, hey, this is how you turn on your camera, because I was teaching them. And then as we were shooting, they would just be like, hey, I accidentally deleted a file. I don't know where it is. Can you come find it? And so it was a lot of that. And then along with that, I was also like helping build sets, helping light sets, doing a little bit of photography here and there. Um, and then somewhere in there, I moved to Atlanta. I was following a girl. The girl part didn't work out, but I was under the impression I love like hip hop and R&B from like the '90s, and so Atlanta was a big scene for that. And so I was like, oh, I bet there's going to be a market opening up in Atlanta. And I was right, but I was like 2 years too early. And so, I should say that for most of the time that I lived in New York, I was waiting tables like full time because the rent
Mm.
was just so expensive. And then the pay for the being a photo assistant wasn't great. And so when I went to Atlanta, I found I was towards the end of New York, I was doing less waiting tables and more photography. And then when I went to Atlanta, all of a sudden I was waiting tables full time again. And so I didn't love that. And so I started looking for work. I found a couple of positions I thought I'd be really good for in Texas and California, of all places. And so I reached out to my friends that were in the photo world, and they were like, if you're going to move to Texas, just go ahead and move all the way to California. And I was like, all right. By the time I got here, both of the jobs that I initially was going to apply for were filled. And so I did a little bit of time working in Hollywood as a PA. And I basically drove a camera crew around in the van for 4 or 5 months to the various locations so they could pick up B-roll and whatever. Shortly after that, I picked up a job with Jupiter Images, which is a stock photo company that is now, it was bought by Getty. And at my job there, I was the studio manager, and so I was kind of managing our studio, but I was also part of an in-house production team that was creating content to sell on their website. And so with that, it was just a melee of jobs. So we were the ones hiring the photographer, we were the ones hiring all the talent, we were also getting all the props, we were doing all the location scouts, and so that, and then there was also some digital asset management on the back end. But that was cool because we felt like I was working with a different photographer every couple of weeks and seeing how they light stuff and how they direct models, all these things that I feel like you can always learn from. Like I said, Getty bought them, and when they did that, I was without a job, and so I was unemployed for about a year. I really like full-time jobs where you get a steady paycheck. That just brings a whole bunch of like calm to myself. And so in that year, I was doing a lot of freelance work, and I knew paychecks were like out in the universe, but I never knew when they would actually get into my mailbox. So I started looking for full-time work again, and in June of 2009, I started working for Disney. And the job specifically was with the Walt Disney Animation Studios. They have an offsite building called the Animation Research Library, and the building itself houses all of the original artwork from all of the hand-drawn animated movies, plus a little bit of the stuff when Disney was only an animation studio, some of the old like Oswald shorts and Mickey Mouse shorts and things like that. So anything that was painted, drawn, colored for an animated movie is in this, well, a large portion of it is in this building. And then we continue to receive new artwork from movies that are being made today. There's still plenty of artists in the building that still work with like a pen and paper or a paintbrush or something like that. Eventually they'll move that stuff into the digital world, but a lot of them still like the tangible quote unquote way of the past. So I've been doing that now a little over 11 years, and it's my job here to photograph that collection. So we're using really high-end camera systems in order to create we're creating a digital archive of the physical collection. Obviously, paper is an organic material, and it's going to decompose out over time. And so our goal is first to photograph as much of the older stuff as possible. But also, right, you never know when, like we had an earthquake today. It was like a 4.5. I slept right through it, but like you never know when like an earthquake or a fire or a flood come through. And so the more of the collection that we can photograph at a very high resolution, the better. And so that's that. And then I continue to freelance on the side. And so I work for a variety of clients as a photographer. And then I also still work as like a photo assistant and a digital tech for other photographers as well. And so because of that, I get to I'm on movie sets a lot, so I'm often assisting a couple of photographers when they need to shoot some. They're called galleries, but it's basically promotional photography for whatever show or movie the actors are currently working on. And I think that's about it. I think that's the journey so far. Yeah.
That's nice. That's great. It sounds like the fact that you still do freelance, and you get a lot of variety in what you do. So you have your day-to-day responsibilities, but then you still have a lot of other things going on. Mm-hmm. Do you ever do do you still do personal work at all, or is it primarily commercial?
It's primarily commercial. I've constantly thought about like a personal project. I'm still thinking about it, but the roadblock that I currently have is that once I start a personal project, I immediately start thinking, how can I make money with this personal project? And then it defeats the purpose of the personal project. So I'm constantly thinking about it, but nothing has sparked enough interest to like where it is. Oftentimes my personal projects I feel like are just random. Like I'll see or get inspired by like someone else's photography or something like that, and I'll just set out to like do something similar or take whatever I learned from that particular person and apply it to something. So these aren't necessarily like grand things, but every once in a while. Like I'm on a chat right now with a whole bunch of people that are photographing the comet. And so I'm about to go on vacation up to Michigan. And so I was like, oh, I wonder what it would be like to try and photograph stars. Like I've never done that before. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll give it a try and maybe that becomes my thing. Who knows?
So let's go back to, I guess, 98, 99 when you started at Winthrop. What brought you to Winthrop initially?
I had a high school art teacher named Mr. Barnfield. I went to Somerville High, right outside Charleston, and at the time, he had created like a whole bunch of experimental classes within the classroom, and a lot of these were probably classes that are common in school now, but like painting and still life and sculpture and photography. And so these were all classes that he just was like, we need to get these in the school. And so we often were the guinea pigs. But I took a couple of semesters of photography. And after that, I was thinking about like where to go to college. I got scholarships to a lot of schools. And so I was in the thought was, let me apply to 5 and hopefully only 1 picks me. And then that's the school I'll go to. And then I'll figure it out from there. And then that didn't. And so originally I was going to go to Clemson and I was going to be an architect. And my high school art teacher suggested that I have some sort of skill in photography and that I should go tour Winthrop. And then while I'm there, he called a professor, Seymour Simmons. I don't know if he's still there. And he had me meet him just for like a quick introduction. And he kind of like walked us like around the art department, just showing me around or whatever, and that kind of just switched it all. So
that's great. Yeah, Seymour retired 3 years ago.
Okay,
but he's still around. Yeah,
gotcha.
He's definitely around. Well, that's great. And so, what in particular? I realized that you moved into commercial photography, and up until recently, there is some more of a commercial bent to some of the work we're doing now with students. But at the time, that wasn't the case. But what do you think Winthrop did really well in preparing you, particularly for that shift when you left here and went out up to New York?
Yeah, well, so if you were to look at big picture, just the amount of offerings that the university as a whole gives students, and these are all obviously things that you have to choose to do. But I was really, really involved in a lot of aspects of student life. And so although I spent most of my time in art buildings, I was in a fraternity. I was in a group that was called Peer Mentors at the time, which basically helped incoming freshmen do a little bit of adjusting. I was on a couple of councils, like Student Alumni Council. There's a couple others. And then on top of that, oh man, now I'm starting to forget things. The thing, it's like where you go, cultural events. That's the
right.
And then just so I felt like Winthrop did a really good job of just exposing me to life beyond Rock Hill and a life beyond South Carolina. I felt like a lot of people that I interacted with on a daily basis, they, for whatever reason, felt like they were going to stay in South Carolina or Rock Hill the rest of their life. And I felt like all of this information I was getting from all of these different things allowed me to see like beyond that. And then in terms of within the department itself, I mean, I feel like I walked away with a really good understanding of like the skills involved in being a photographer. Like I feel like for the most part, when I walked onto set, other than learning some new terminology for maybe the way in which a photographer called something that I didn't, I felt like I was already pretty comfortable when I showed up for like my first day or whatever. So
That's great. Are you in touch with any of your old faculty?
Yeah, I send not so much Phil Moody anymore because he retired.
Hmm.
But I still email Mark Hamilton all the time, mainly when
Okay.
a job comes across my computer or something, or an internship. Just because you know, the more information and knowledge that you can get as a student, so when you walk out of Winthrop and into the real world, you have that advantage. Um, I feel like let's get that to the people that need it, which are people that are currently in school. And so, yeah, so we are, it's typically the extent of our conversations. It's basically like, hey, I saw this, might be perfect for, um, one of your students. And then there's a couple of persons that email me and are like, hey, would you take a few minutes to talk to this student about,
Mm.
um, you know, whatever questions they have about becoming like a photographer or whatever. So,
Yeah, that's great. We appreciate that because often our alums are the ones who can really um, offer good guidance to the students. They tend to believe you more than they'll believe their professor because
sure.
they see a distinction, even though the professor is also a professional.
Hmm.
Um, so when you think back to Winthrop, what's your favorite memory from college?
Oh man. I mean, at some in the back, surprisingly, I took a lot of ceramics towards
Mm.
the end of my undergrad, and that's because I needed some art electives. But I was surprised at how much I enjoyed just being at the wheel at
Hmm.
all hours of the night, trying to finish a project on time or whatever. And so I have really fond memories of that. I was also, I don't think they have any anymore, but I was a cheerleader for Winthrop. And so I got
Mm.
to travel with the team whenever they would go to like the Big South tournament and NCAA tournament. And so I think that those things are all really cool. And then I think in general, it was just a lot of the time you're just surrounded by your peers all the time working on projects. And so,
Hmm.
there'll be something I'll be doing today that'll pop in my, and it'll remind me of something that as like a freshman or a sophomore that I was doing. And I was like, oh yeah, I remember when we were all sitting around drawing stairs or whatever.
Yeah, there's a lot of drawing of stairs in art schools. Um, what kinds of things inspire you today, would you say?
Uh, Music is a good
Hmm.
one. My wife is a singer songwriter, and so we're constantly listening to whatever is the latest and the greatest, or stuff that maybe isn't the latest and the greatest that we just haven't heard and someone recommended. On top of that, she also, because she's a singer songwriter, she's always working on something in our apartment. So that's pretty inspiring. And then I'm really fascinated just by people's stories. No matter like how like boring they might think it is, just like being able to hear someone's journey. Also feel super inspired by. And then and then working at Disney is a daily inspiration. So sorry about that. Um, every day I'm coming into this building and I'm photographing something that somebody drew, could have been like 50, 60 years ago. Right now I'm photographing a whole bunch of Pinocchio hand-drawn animation. And before that,
Wow.
I was photographing some Lady and the Tramp. And just to see like how someone in their mind figured out how to draw on paper a dog that walked and chewed or whatever, uh, so that it looked realistic. Like every day, you just look at it and go, "That's incredible." I mean, I was an okay drawer in at Winthrop, but like the level of
Mhm.
this is crazy. But then on top of that, I'm also, because I'm part of the animation studio, I get to see artists creating in their environment right now, and so they're at home working on movies that will hopefully go into the theater, and so I'm constantly getting to see like the progress of those movies and like how things evolve and change and notes and all that stuff. So yeah.
Well, that's great. So to wrap it up, is there anything you want to say to current students? Like, what's your sage advice?
Oh man. Uh, I think so. One of the things that I did late at Winthrop was I started working on my portfolio. Probably not until like my senior year, but that's also because I didn't really know what I wanted to do as a photographer. And so I was able to go down to Florida for one weekend and work with a photographer, and he was shooting like a clothing line or something like that. But it was my first time ever getting to be on like in an environment like that. Everything else was like in a Winthrop studio, and so that kind of like gave me the nudge that I didn't know I needed to like start working like on a very specific like path, I guess. But then I realized that if I had to go back and do it again, knowing what I know now, I would probably be using every one of the projects that I'm working on as a freshman, a sophomore, in some way to help elevate my work as a photographer, so that when I walk out of when I graduate and I have a portfolio to show, I would hope that it's as strong as someone who's already been working for like 5, 10 years. Because I feel like the one thing that I had a disadvantage of when I came out of Winthrop was because I was all like, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. When I got out, I didn't have I had some good pieces in my portfolio, but I wouldn't say I had a strong enough portfolio to show people that I could work for you and you should pay me money to take these photos. So there's that. I would say learn a little bit about how to build a website, and I think that goes for not just photographers but all artists, right? Like if you're in a visual media, like the people want to see what you do, because that's how they're going to decide whether or not they hire you, and so if you only have like 3 or 4 pieces on your website, they might be like, oh, these are great, do you have anything else? But if you have like 50 good pieces, then they're like, oh, okay, this person, they would assume that you know what you're doing even if you don't.
Right.
So that's that. And I would make sure that as many people are going to as many different cultural events as possible. I feel like there was so much good stuff being brought to Winthrop through, is it Dinkins, DSU, whatever. There's just so much good stuff that can provide inspiration for you as an artist by just going and go to things that you don't think that you would find interesting, because I feel like that's typically also, and someone will say something or they'll show something and you're like, oh, that's interesting, and then that might put you in a direction. I think I don't know if it's currently being offered, but if you are going to become any sort of commercial person and you're going to like run a business, I would highly suggest taking a business class. Like learn how to do books, learn about taxes, learn about like profit and loss statements. It's not fun, but it's stuff that you need to learn how to do if you want to run a successful business, which is yourself. I think
Thank you. That's really good. Yeah, no, that's really good advice. And some of those things we've actually implemented, professional practices and more practical entrepreneurship and business practices. All right. Well, thank you, Matt. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today.
Yeah, no problem. I hope that was helpful. I feel like sometimes I ramble, so.
Not at all. Not at all. You take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.